on, but appendix doesn't tell you you have to do anything. It just shows you where the high radon areas are. So, and like I say, Western Washington isn't a high radon zone.
Mm-hmm. We'll continue this conversation in a few minutes, I'm sure.
Probably so.
I guess we are 2 minutes past the hour. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It looks like we have enough people for a quorum, so why don't we get started? Krista, do you want to do roll call?
Certainly. Chell Anderson,
Present.
Caroline Traub,
Here.
Diane Glenn, Andrew Klein,
I'm here.
Doug Orth,
Present.
Todd Bayreuther,
Here.
Phil Lemley. Okay, we do have a quorum present.
Great. Okay, welcome to the post St. Patrick's Day edition of the MVE committee. We have a reasonably short agenda today. Has anybody looked at it and have any comments on it before we approve it? Oh, I guess we should ask are there any members of the public that want to be recognized? Is that something we normally do, Krista?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that. Any members of the public that want to be recognized? Okay, we'll take that as we see your names anyway, so you know who you are. All right. Any comments on the agenda?
Shall I guess I was just curious, the issue that Doug was just bringing up, I don't see that on this agenda.
Yeah, there's 3 documents, I guess, on the Building Code Council website. 2 are opinions and 1 is the integrated draft. So yeah, we should move the other opinion to the agenda.
Right. Right now it's kind of hovering on other business since it's officially an IRC opinion, and so comes under the other committee.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. That makes sense.
So we could weigh in on it, but it's not officially our jurisdiction. So, okay, why don't we move it to other business and discuss it then? With that, are there any motions to see the agenda forward?
Move to approve the agenda.
We have a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of this motion, say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Okay, with flying colors, we pass. Anybody have any comments on the minutes from our last meeting in December? Okay, well, I will entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the minutes as written, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes. We have minutes now. Okay, Energy Code Tag report on the 2021 integrated draft. I'll provide that. First of all, we are not done with the integrated draft. We were hoping to be done with the integrated draft for this committee's review by today, but we're not. So it'll be the next committee meeting, which is April 15th, I believe, tax day, or formerly known as tax day. that we will consider the integrated draft, moving that forward to the council for approval. So I guess today we could spend a great deal of time on it. We could spend a very little time on it. I'll give you maybe a 3 to 5 minute summary. And then we can decide if we want to dig in further or if we want to await the next MVE meeting where we can discuss it after it's fully baked, or, you know, fully baked by the tag. So as an introduction to what we're doing, we have the 2018 Washington State Energy Code, which just recently went into effect. And we are integrating it with the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code. And the reason we're doing this, we are not writing code language. We are simply taking the 2018 Washington State Energy Code commercial and overlaying the pieces of the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code that would move it forward in terms of energy performance or clarity of language. We have the rule of not making it worse in terms of performance. So if there's like a value of a lighting power density of 0.5 and the IECC moves it to 0.4, we should probably take the 0.4 because that's the more stringent of the two. So that's the general rules we're playing by. And it's simply an exercise in doing that and then correlating the two so that what we release to the public in a month or two is relatively coordinated with itself and the best of the IECC and the Washington State Energy Code. Those are the goals. Are there any questions about the goals or comments on the goals? So the integrated, okay, I'll just take that as a no. It's about 213 pages long, the integrated draft. Krista has done an amazing job of threading the two things together and making them relatively seamless, and then highlighting areas where there's concern or where there's questions. And there's a lot. We've already met for several hours and gone through this, and there's a lot of discussion on how we have decent code language. So so the overall process will, this will go to the MVE committee in a month. If the MVE committee approves it or makes modifications, then it goes to the council the following day. Council will then suggest that it goes out for a 60-day public comment period. That 60-day public comment period is where all and any code change proposals that will be part of the next code will be accepted. The code change proposals have to have economic data and some other data associated with them, but we'll probably accept 100 or more proposals. So the integrated draft is what will go out to receive those proposals. So we can't expect that every section of the code will get a code change proposal for it. We hope that actually doesn't happen. So we need to make sure that the code is relatively consistent with itself, so that if nobody changes it, it's still acceptable as is. And that's one of the reasons why we're spending a great deal of time on this, so that if nobody changes it in the code change proposal process, we don't end up with problems with consistency in the code. So where we've gone through, I don't know, 2/3 of the code, 3/4 of the code, probably, and we've given homework assignments for I don't know, in 8 or 12 areas where we knew we couldn't come to a conclusion, and we didn't want to wordsmith something within the tag because that can just take hours. And ultimately is not maybe the best use of the tag's time. We have about 18 or 19 people on the tag. So there's a lot of intelligence and a lot of knowledge and experience we're bringing to bear to the code. So we have another meeting on the 26th, I believe, of March, where we will consider, and hopefully this is the last, in my mind, hopefully this is the last tag meeting to consider this, 8:30 to 1 o'clock, and we will go through the rest of the code and then go back through all the homework items that people have had where they're correlating something with something else. I think overall it's going well. I think we're we're going to come up with something that is solid and provides a great basis. And I don't have any major concerns about that. I guess that's a brief report of where we are, where we're going. We can dive into any of the details if you want, or I can answer any questions about it. I'll open up to the committee and the public right now if there's questions or comments. You want more detail, or you're fine with what's been said already?
Works for me.
So this is Sean Mullins. I'm Blowing Scoring. I just have a quick question. Do you have any idea on the timeline for getting to PUCs?
PUC?
Public comments?
Okay. Here's my best guess, and I don't know, maybe Krista, would you provide a guess?
Well, what we're kind of assuming right now is that the comment period for proposals will be from April 1st to the end of May. And then those proposals would go to the tag for review and come back hopefully by September. And then looking at putting out the CR 102 and a request for comment and all the public testimony, written comments in around November. That's all assuming that we get everything done at the next meeting and everything works, but that's
So
kind of
Krista,
staff's current thinking.
Appreciate it.
so Krista, I guess I was under the impression that after the tag gets finished with it, it needs to go through the MVE and the Building Code Council. Did I misunderstand that?
No, that would be in September, October.
Okay, so after the tag gets finished with it, it can go straight to public comment?
Well, it'll go to the committee in September, October, and then out for public comment in November.
So April 1st, regarding the April 1st out for public comment.
Or code change proposals.
Code change proposals, yeah. Okay, so from the tag, it doesn't need to go to this committee or the Building Code Council before it goes out for code change proposals?
That's kind of what we'll be discussing tomorrow, how we're
Okay,
gonna move forward on the energy code.
okay. And just a piece of context, the International Energy Conservation Code was published a couple months late. So we're a bit behind. And right now, the unfortunate thing about the energy code tag is we're probably going to be meeting in June, July, and possibly August, which is a horrible time to try and gather 20 people together to discuss really exciting topics. Because the International Energy Conservation Code is published later, we're going to be, instead of considering this in the spring, we're going to be considering it in the summer, which is vacation time and going to be more challenging to get a quorum and to get all the voices to the table. Okay, so tomorrow at the Building Code Council, we'll decide if we can put it out for public comment on April 1st or not, I guess. Any other questions? So I guess this is the only time, Krista, then, that the MVE committee would consider anything about the integrated draft before we potentially put it out for code change proposals.
Right, they'll see it again in April, but we may or may not be accepting proposals already at that time, so.
Yeah. Okay, are there comments, questions? Do you want to dive in a little bit more, or are we comfortable with where? There's no action, or that it says committee action on this. Is there a committee action that we should take, Krista?
No, that was kind of me being overly optimistic that the tag would finish and we would have a finalized document.
Yep, okay. I was equally optimistic. Okay, well, I guess this segment of the agenda is done if there's no more questions or comments. I guess let's move on to item 5. Public opinion on the C407.2 performance-based compliance. Krista's showing up there. So I guess, Krista, often we have somebody read this.
Sure. So this is on C407 total building performance. The question is section C407.2 of the 2018 Washington State Energy Code states that otherwise components of the project that would not be approved as part of a building permit application shall be modeled the same in both the proposed building and the standard reference design and shall comply with the requirements of this code. Now that the standard reference design utilizes ASHRAE Appendix G and the building performance factors per table C407.32, should components not yet designed still be modeled the same? The proposed answer is no. The code specifies that the not yet designed proposed components shall comply with this code. This code refers to the Washington State Energy Code, not ASHRAE 90.1.
As context, I guess, Caroline, I'm going to put you on the spot. Could you translate this into English for us?
Yeah, I can give it a shot. So in the 2015 Energy Code in C407, the standard reference design model SRD was attempting to be equivalent to a 2015 building, roughly. And your proposed design had to be 7, 10, or 13% better than that. So this language in that context, if you had an area of the building that was not yet designed, for instance, it was a core and shell permit, and you had some areas that did not yet have design elements in the permit set, you would model those elements as if it was a 2015 building, or same in the baseline and proposed models. In the new 2018 code, C407 changed dramatically, and the Washington specific reference model went away. And now the baseline is a 90.1 2016 Appendix G model. And that is roughly equivalent to a 90.1 2004 building. And the reason for that is from here forth for all future code cycles, that baseline building does not change. It is now a stable baseline that is a 2004 building. And the idea is every code cycle, we are going to make the threshold for how much better you need to be than that 2004 building increase a little bit. And so this overall is a much better method, because instead of every code cycle, the baseline trying to get updated to match roughly a prescriptive building, it is now going to be constant. And so back to then the question at hand, when something from a proposed permit set is not yet designed, it would not make sense to penalize the project and say you need to model that as if it was a 2004 component. And so what this interpretation is trying to say is that the elements not yet designed should be designed to what would be minimally required in the prescriptive sections of the 2018 Washington State Code. And this is somewhat analogous to how it's dealt with in 90.1 2016 Appendix G, where if that was the code in effect in that appendix for proposed not yet designed elements, it refers you back to the prescriptive sections of 90.1 2016. It doesn't imply that you should model them the same as the baseline, a 2004 building. If that made any sense.
It did. Yeah. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on this opinion?
This is Mike Baranick with Hargis Engineers. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I actually worked with the city of Bellevue to submit this question. So if I'm understanding the interpretation correctly, parts of the building that have not yet been designed, let's take, say, lighting power density, for example. The same lighting power density should be used in both the standard reference design and the proposed design. And that lighting power density should be based on the 2018 Washington State Energy Code. Is that the interpretation I'm understanding?
I think the intent would be that the baseline model is going to be modeled as it is required in 90.1 2016 Appendix G. And the proposed design would be designed with prescriptive LPDs according to the 2018 Washington State Energy Code.
Okay, so yeah, I think that's what I had assumed as well, as at least the intent of the code. I guess, again, the language in C407.2, I believe no longer makes sense because of the fact that, the standard reference design now references ASHRAE. So I guess, is this interpretation agreeing that we should essentially strike that provision out of C407.2 because it no longer applies?
I think if we had that ability, yes, that would be preferable, but we can't. Chell, Christy, you can weigh in, but my understanding is we can't change the code language right now. We can only give our opinion on what it is meaning.
Okay. Okay, I'm just making sure I understand the interpretation correctly. So, great, thank you.
All right, are there other comments or questions on the opinion or the answer as written for the question? All right, well, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the answer or opinion as written.
This is Andrew. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 I heard 4 ayes, so all opposed say nay. Don't have anybody else that can say nay. All right. Passes with flying colors. That brings us to other business. And I think under other business, we were going to possibly opine on something that is not our jurisdiction. We can have opinions though.
That's right.
So this is a request for opinion that came in looking at unvented crawl spaces and if it would be allowable to heat the crawl space and have it meet the requirements of an insulated
A conditioned
space
space.
for conditioned space for ductwork. So the background on this, the IRC allows for a conditioned air supply to be delivered to the crawl space and recirculated to the common area. Washington removed this option in their amendment so as to not allow communication between the crawl space and common areas. The amendment allows continuously operated mechanical exhaust, but does not require an air intake from the outside. Can a heat duct be provided into the crawl space, which would be mechanically drawn to the exterior and thus not communicating with the common area, to provide a conditioned space for ductwork complying with section R403.3.7 of the Washington State Energy Code, if the other conditions in the amendment to IRC section R408.3 are met? The proposed answer is yes. If the requirements of IRC section R408.3 and the thermal envelope and area barrier requirements of the Washington State Energy Code are met, this could be considered conditioned space.
Is this abundantly clear to anybody, everybody? What we're talking about here?
It is to me. I don't necessarily like how our current code is written, but it does make the question and the answer do make sense.
Yeah, basically, if you enclose and do the air barrier test on a crawl space such that it's basically just part of the house, because it's got the insulation and the air barrier requirements, then of course it's within the insulated space, and meets the requirements. That's kind of the common language thing that I understand about it.
Jill, this is Dwayne. I
Hey,
just
Dwayne?
want to make sure I understand what you're doing correctly. I think they're saying, are they that they're going to make a conditioned space so that they can say that this ductwork is in a conditioned space instead of just insulating the ductwork better?
Yes, that's how I understand it as well.
Brilliant.
This is actually a very common condition, particularly on the East Coast. We have higher humidity. They do an encapsulated crawl space. Then they introduce heated and cooled air into this encapsulated and enclosed crawl space. The funky thing that I see here is by having this, introducing this, say, warm air, and then you've got to mechanically drawn to the exterior. You're potentially, I don't know what you're doing to the negative, positive air pressure in that crawl space, and just doesn't quite compute. But as far as the code is concerned, I think the answer seems to be correct.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, I concur. I mean, if you essentially are making it into a basement, a very short basement that's not, legally a basement.
Then you're putting a hole in the wall. So your air barrier is still going to be your subflooring above this crawl space, it would seem, and you've kind of got this.
Well, I think my understanding of that, Doug, is that this would mean that if here's your floor and your crawl space is down here, you have a little house here. This. I'm embarrassed to be an architect and drawing this, but that you'd actually insulate this, and your air barrier would be down here as well.
But
if you're trying to get your ductwork to.
But you've got no communication between your crawl space and your house. You're right. Your thermal break is on the exterior wall. You're going to add insulation to the stem wall of the crawl space, but you're not creating a coupled air connection between the crawl space and the house for this.
So you're suggesting that you would be able to have an air barrier up at this level.
I think your air barrier would be there. Your thermal barrier would be down below. Not necessarily, you wouldn't have thermal on the ground, but you'd have thermal on your stem walls.
I guess is your air barrier and your thermal supposed to be aligned with each other, or I guess can they be different?
Technically, they're supposed to be aligned. But it doesn't mean you can't have the air barrier both on the stem wall as well as between. You can have both need to be insulated and have an air barrier on the outside, but between it doesn't matter. You could have them insulated or not insulated in between, air barrier or no air barrier in between. So I think what Doug's saying is, yeah, you still have the air barrier, but you insulate, and likely, yeah, technically you do need the air barrier too underneath.
So you need pressure testing this whole thing up here and down here, right? Your air
Yeah.
barrier test would include this whole area.
But 4083 requires a continuous exhaust in your crawl space exterior to the exterior. So now you just introduced a big hole in the wall. That's why I'm suggesting that your air barrier needs to be the subfloor, but yeah, it's a little funky.
But if it only in an unconditioned airspace, you would need that flow, correct, Doug? Or you would need, even with a conditioned airspace?
Well, our
You need
answer says if we meet the requirements of IRC 4083, if the thermal envelope and air are met. So our IRC 408.3 requires a continuous exhaust vent, I believe.
Okay, then we need to change that answer then, I think.
I agree that we need to change the answer.
Here, let me read 408.3. Item 2 says continuously operated mechanical exhaust ventilation is provided at a rate equal to 1 cubic feet. This is under the heading of an unvented crawl space. So you've got to provide a continuous operated mechanical exhaust ventilation in that crawl space to be unvented. And this is where Washington Code deviated from the ICC in that the underlying code has this, it couples the common space with the crawl space, and we don't. We took that out.
So it sounds like by doing that, we basically disallowed the option of having, what they're asking for in this question.
Well, that's kind of where I like the idea of having that crawl space be a conditioned space for the purposes of capturing that energy code, but I'm not sure how to get it with how the underlying code is written.
So my understanding of radon is it gets into spaces from the ground, and if you had an air barrier that was intact, you would prevent the radon from getting into the crawl space in the first place because you had the air barrier below it. If you didn't have the air barrier protecting the crawl space, then you would get radon into the crawl space, which is why you would need to continuously exhaust it.
I don't know enough about radon. Does radon not penetrate through a typical air barrier?
I think there's a minimum thickness and all. There are standards for it, but yeah, basically. And Shell, maybe but I don't know if it's the typical air barrier or you have to like step up a notch. But
I don't know the answer to that one. And once radon gets in, the air barrier on the rest of the house would keep it in, which is probably the concerning part. That if you didn't have enough fresh air coming into the house, then once it got in, it would not leave readily.
So the problem with going back to the answer, the problem with the answer is if you meet the requirements of 408.3, you've got this continuously operated mechanical exhaust ventilation in that space, and the only time that would be, it seems like that would militate against that being a conditioned space. It just
So you do either you do this and it's a crawl space that is not inside the thermal envelope, or you do this and then it is inside the thermal envelope, but then you don't continuously vent it.
But can you not continuously vent it per our current code? That's the question.
Well, I guess at some point it's not a crawl space anymore. It's a
Any
very,
basement.
very short enclosed part of the heated and cooled house.
Yeah. I mean, that would be another way to look at it. It would be kind of an extrapolation of code. You could view it as a very, like say, very short conditioned space. and therefore wouldn't require that vent, that continuously operated ventilation. I don't know. I'm just.
Yeah, I
asking.
guess it goes back to crawl space definition, and you know, you might even need an alternative mean in order to do it that way. But yeah, it gets complicated with yes buts and no ands with the
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah. And I know in other parts of the country, some people are using, rather than introducing heated, cooled air into that crawl space, they're putting dehumidifiers in there and calling it conditioned space. So
I guess what our charge today is, this is not our direct jurisdiction, but we could probably provide input. Like Krista, I guess the goal of today, we would not submit an answer that would be the official opinion of the Building Code Council. We're providing input into the other committee that would eventually provide the opinion. Is that correct?
Yes. So we're informing Andrew of what our opinion would be.
All right.
Hey, I'm just chair. It's the members of the committee that make the decisions.
Okay. I guess what I've kind of taken from this conversation is you either have a crawl space that is not part of the conditioned space and it would need to be continuously vented, or it is part of the thermal envelope and air barrier, within the thermal envelope and air barrier, in which case it would not need to be continuously vented, but it's considered a heated and cooled space, even if there's no direct heating and cooling supplying to that space.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it's worthwhile probably mentioning, consider, depending on how you look at it, you have to consider, additional factors, including but not limited to, radiation mitigation, et cetera.
there are other ways to mitigate the radon, and it's typically done with a perforated pipe system below the vapor barrier, and then vented through your plumbing stack or wherever, vented to the outside. So there are ways.
But every builder is not going to be wanting to put that in to every house.
That is true. So yeah, it's just, I think when the TAG developed this code, they didn't necessarily consider all the permutations that might occur.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we can provide, should we provide a written answer to Andrew that reflects our conversation today within this? Should we wordsmith an answer that then goes to Andrew, or?
It's up to you. I mean, later this afternoon is our meeting anyway, so I think we've discussed it enough for consideration, but if you want to put something together, you're welcome to. But
Okay,
I don't think it's necessary if you don't want to.
I'd rather at least formalize our discussion with a sentence or two for the record.
Okay. You kind of stated it once already, Joe.
Yeah, I think if we say something like either the space is considered an unvented crawl space and outside the thermal envelope and air barrier, per section R408.3, or and meets requirements of section R408.3. or it is designed as part of the conditioned space where ducts are within the space enclosed by air barrier and thermal requirements.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
And does not require section R408.3 to be met,
Well, just,
or continuous exhaust.
yeah, 403, it'd be 408.3.2, that's the specific one. 408.3.1 talks about the quality and installation of the vapor barrier itself.
408.3.2, did you say?
Yeah. That's the one that deals specifically with the mechanical exhaust ventilation. 408.3.1 talks about meeting radon requirements of Appendix F. So that would still apply.
Well, this is item 2 then, right?
I'm not sure what item 2 means.
Because I thought it was a 408.3 had a list, or is it actually?
There's under 408.3, there's 2 sub paragraphs, 1 and 2. And 2 is the one that deals with the mechanical exhaust. Yeah, item 2. Yeah, that works.
I guess this is our opinion based on the energy code, not based on, you know, the building code and detailed understanding of radon.
Yeah.
Okay, do we need to, is any further discussion on this statement as written? It is not an official answer. It is simply something to codify or to collect the information from our discussion. Any further comments, questions?
Yeah, I guess, Chal, just on the second part of that sentence, then what we're really saying is if you've made the crawl space part of the conditioned space and it's in the air barrier and thermal requirements, it needs to comply with option 1, which is you put this continuous vapor retarder and you comply with the radon requirements, right? Because I think what we're trying to avoid is you heat that space and then you mechanically exhaust it.
Yeah.
But because it's a crawl space, it's like this short non-basement thing. And so you still have radon concerns. So then if we don't want you to comply with option 2, we do want you to comply with option 1.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, do we need to vote on this, Krista, or do we need to make it official?
I think since it's advisory only, you don't necessarily need to, but you can if you want to.
I don't see the need to if we don't need to. This is simply an opinion on that might influence an opinion. So, Andrew, you have what you need?
Yep, I've got what I need. Thank you.
Great. Okay, well, I think we're done with this item. Is there any other business? Well, then,
Bill?
yeah, go ahead.
I raised this question on the legislative committee last week. It's my understanding tomorrow or Friday, is that tomorrow? Tomorrow, in the council meeting, we potentially will discuss the ICC change to the moving the energy code to a standard? Is there any discussion to be had here, or can that be saved for tomorrow? Or am I incorrect in that?
It is on the agenda for tomorrow, but we can discuss it here if the committee desires.
I have no question, so I just was just curious. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I have an opinion on it that I'm happy to discuss. I think, you know, it was unfortunate that it happened, and it was a, you know, strategic by several organizations. There's plenty of articles about the reason for it, but it appears that some of the organizations that typically fight against increasing the stringency of the code exercised some channels to change it from the process that has allowed lots of code officials across the country to vote on it, to move it forward, which is the kind of the majority of code officials across the country, to move it forward in terms of energy performance, to a different method, which will allow fewer code officials across the country to have an input into it, which will likely result in it being increased, having less increased stringency over the next period of time. And it's unfortunate, and it's, you know, it was a strategic decision, and it was not a happenstance decision. And it's, you know, based on the fact that we've actually had a lot of code officials register and vote on this recently, which has made it a better code and certainly helped Washington meet our climate goals. The better the IECC is, the easier it is for Washington to meet our legislative mandates. So I think it's unfortunate. I don't know what we can do about it, but that's my opinion on it. Todd, did you have any?
Oh, and thank you. I just wanted to raise the question and make sure it was on the agenda tomorrow, and if we're all going to be there, obviously. So
Yeah, right now it's on the agenda under staff report, and is part of that staff report.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, any other business? I guess it gives me great pleasure to adjourn then.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
All right. See y'all later.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.